What's this? You're telling me this for the first time?
I don't know if I sent a text to everybody reminding them that I sent the thing via Discord. I imagine his Discord is like lit up all the time. So
yeah, maybe. As a creator of my size, 17,000 subscribers and I don't know, several thousand Twitter followers and stuff. The only reason I say that is because it made me realize, like, oh, a lot of smaller content creators just like don't reply to their messages. Like, because it's not like I don't get a number of messages. Like, if I don't reply to you, I just did it. I just chose not to, basically, right? But I don't know, for a guy like Hutch, like, he might, at a certain point, you reach a level where it's like you truly cannot reply to all these.
He's got 800 something thousand YouTube subscribers. I think hundreds of thousands of Twitter subscribers. He's basically, I mean, there's a reason he just goes by Hutch and he doesn't even have
millions of loyal followers.
Yeah,
really.
No, 100%. Yeah,
that's fair. Hutch, how many DMs, like across all your platforms, how many DMs do you get a day?
And not exclude the dick pics, like non-dick pic DMs.
I don't keep my DMs open. Do you guys?
I don't know how to turn it off.
Well, no, but there has to be like, like Reddit messages, emails. Like, I'm sure there's a way for fans to directly contact you. Maybe there's not.
It's either through the stream or for Twitter, but I took Twitter off my phone like 5 days ago. So that's I don't know. I try to I used to be really invested in reading like every single comment, and the channels were popping off a lot more back in the gaming days. And so it's like, there's a little bit of rebuilding with the political stuff, but I used to spend a lot of time like in the comments and in the replies. And for me, it just wasn't healthy. So, usually when I get done streaming, I try to just like focus on other stuff, making dinner, doing chores, doing stuff that I like. Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you mean stuff that you like? You don't like political commentary? You don't like arguing with MAGA?
He doesn't like interacting with the fans.
I actually don't believe that's true. Hutch is in the fucking trenches all the time. Like,
that's not even true these days.
Really?
No. I look at my Twitter. I'm not like I straight up. I took it off my phone. So I'm addicted to Twitter. So I took it off my phone and I gave my wifey the password. And so I can't. I like, even if I wanted to sign in on my phone, I couldn't do it. So
Hutch. Let's see here.
Do you have Blue Sky on your phone?
Yeah, but that's not crazy. Like Blue
trading Sky one addiction for another, Hutch.
Oh, look,
but I'm not. No, but I'm not like, I don't spend a ton of time on Blue Sky, but yeah.
Yeah, I haven't posted on Blue Sky in like 12 days. I mean, it's just reflex at this point. It's muscle memory.
Got 4 hours ago. Argument today.
And then 5 days ago.
Oh,
like
I'm
not in the trenches at all right now.
Have they worn you out? Have they browbeat you into submission?
No, I'm just fucking. I don't have the energy for it. I gotta save my energy for when the administration actually starts. So
it's crazy to think about how we're not even there yet. I mean, Trump did this unhinged press conference earlier today, and the thing I kept saying to myself is, this motherfucker is not even president yet. This is where we are. So sad.
We watched the whole thing on the stream today. I mean, for as far as like press conferences go for Trump, it wasn't like super insane. It's just,
and I take your point, but I'm so fucking tired. I really am. I understand why we do it, but for Trump, that wasn't bad. He only threatened defamation suits against everybody he doesn't like, and lied about the 2020 election again. And
I guess it was unhinged. Yeah, now that you mention it.
It's just no. I mean, to your point, it's unhinged objectively, but you're right. Also, by Trump standards, that's not a top 50. That was not a top 50 press conference.
No,
Yeah. Well, it's hard to say because it's like, again, it's just like what we talked about last week. Because Trump really, he's kind of a boy who cried wolf in some regards, because he does say a lot of shit that he doesn't do. He just like doesn't end up following up on. But then he does follow up on something. Like he's a very chaotic, like unpredictable person, which is of course why he's best positioned to handle all of our foreign policy according to the MAGAs. So, maybe that's a good thing. He's so wild and unpredictable that he'll get a deal with Putin in Ukraine and he'll end the Gaza war immediately. But anyway, we see Josiah crafting a tweet right now.
I'm doing it in real time. I'm trying to get better about multitasking, and I suck at it, unfortunately. Try with my girlfriend, like if she's having a conversation with me, also checking emails and stuff like that. Not great relationship advice. You should probably stay 100% focused on your significant other. But when I try to save time, it's a struggle. it's a bitch.
Yeah, multitasking, that's a skill in and of itself. But anyway, for those that are wondering, Pisco, he's not able to make it at the start of the show because he's busy touching grass. All right. He'll be here later, maybe. But it'll just be us three for the first hour, hour and a half, maybe the whole show. Who knows, guys? You might be stuck with just the three of us. No Pisco.
We did have a good time sparring with people in chat last time, so maybe we could do an open invite if anybody wants to.
No, 100%. And by the way, I mean, so that was the other thing. Like, so I don't know.
Take your Twitter off the screen. What are you doing?
What do you mean?
Yeah.
Oh,
get it together.
You're just checking your Twitter, and it's showing up in the whole podcast.
I understand. We were looking at your Twitter page, and then I got distracted by. You're right. I should stop.
Look at you. You're sitting there browsing Twitter while you're doing the podcast.
Well, you listen here because we're looking for content. Well, I forgot Pisco.
No excuse.
Pisco's going to be gone for work. He may not even be showing up. It's probably just the three amigos today.
Well, I have a question. Hold on. So I posted on my Twitter.
I can't look at it. Hutch will yell at me. Don't even say that.
It would be irresponsible to delete it from your phone. Now I posted on my Twitter. I asked people, what are some realistically good things that you think the Trump administration will end up doing, if any? Some people got very memey in my responses.
Let's take a look.
Some people said, the best thing is that he'll make the quality of life of MAGA supporters worse. That was like a pretty funny response.
What's the actual answer to this question? Like,
wait, where the fuck is this?
I think you passed it up, Josiah.
How many hours ago was it?
Scroll down a little bit. Right there.
I'm a supporter of Space Force. I say that was a good thing.
He already did that though, Hutch. He's locked that in. What are the new good things? I said maybe some permitting reform could be good, but that's a very wonky thing that most people don't care about. Other than that, I mean, some people said, oh, he'll recognize Somaliland and maybe Kurdistan, and it's like, oh, maybe that's a good thing. Like foreign policy wise.
Can someone explain Somaliland to me? What's that whole situation?
Somaliland is a part of Somalia. I can't remember the region of Somalia that it is. And I'm not going to do, if you want a good video on it, James Kerr-Lindsey, he's a foreign policy guy on YouTube and did a video about Somaliland. But Somaliland is basically a wealthier part of Somalia, which actually has a pretty well administered government and, like, generally speaking, rule of law within Somalia, though. And they've been arguing for independence for a long time because of like cultural, like ethno-religious reasons. And then I think also it's like, well, hey, like we are actually a functioning government where Somalia isn't. Like, it's almost like having like it's like if all of America collapsed except for like the state of North Dakota or something. And North Dakota was like, look, why don't we just be our own country? This place sucks. And so he signaled support for their cause, I suppose. And then Kurdistan and northern Syria being its own country does sound pretty base, especially now that Assad's gone. So maybe that would be a good thing. But I don't actually know if Trump signals support for that.
Has anybody in MAGA world or in the centrist camp, has anybody done a wellness check on Tulsi Gabbard? Because I've not seen any sort of high-profile public appearance
from her. He called Assad a butcher.
This was a tough loss.
Trump called Assad a butcher in the press conference today. So yeah, I was saying the same thing to my chat. Like, somebody check on Tulsi, see how she's doing.
Oh my God! Wait, so Assad was not only overthrown, but her new cult leader is throwing Assad under the bus.
Yeah.
Damn! What a 1-2 punch. Right. Tulsi, if you're watching, please be sure to like and subscribe to all three of our channels. And my condolences.
Yeah, I get the feeling that Tulsi is one of those people that, like, if you could peer into her mind and like really get what her real beliefs are, I feel like she would be genuinely maybe the most unhinged person that Trump has picked so far. Like, I feel like she's like
American Psycho. There's nothing behind those eyes. And if you go back into her history, her dad was this state level Democrat serving at the state level in Hawaii, and he was like virulently homophobic, and I suppose she inherited that from him. So back in the early 2000s, she was talking about the gay agenda. She's also a part of a fucking cult, a literal cult.
Yeah,
nobody talks about it.
Well, doubly so now.
But she's in a literal cult. Like, it's like this guru guy, and it's this white guy who's like a Hindu guru, and he's super homophobic as well. They're like super Islamophobic. Yeah,
And for
it's gnarly.
people who think Hutch is exaggerating, just look it up. It's about as bizarre as Hutch has described. And again, it's just one of those things like people just aren't talking about this and nobody, when she was a congresswoman, this wasn't the thing that came up. Like it just, oh yeah, like Tulsi's part of a cult, like whatever. I guess this wasn't a big
But she
conversation.
is, though. It's not a joke. Literally Google it and you'll see what we're talking
Clearly
about.
crystal clear, says all those 51 security professionals who signed off on Hunter Biden's laptop was Russian propaganda, but you consider Tulsi a problem.
That's a
Yeah,
great
Hutch.
point.
Yeah, exactly, Hutch. Fucking owned, aren't you?
Yeah, I bet you feel like a bitch, Hutch.
Do we really want to fucking...
Hutch gets exasperated.
Man, I just never want to talk about Hunter Biden again. I could just go the rest of my
Why
life
not?
without uttering the words because it's just fucking.
I can give
Jesus.
you 9
Years
really
of this
good
shit, bro.
I can give you 9 really good reasons as to why we should talk about Hunter Biden.
You know what's funny about that whole thing? We need to talk about this, okay? Because like the Republicans have been alleging this improper connection between Joe Biden and his son Biden via his business dealings abroad with like China and Ukraine. The whole premise was that, Biden was using the office of the vice presidency, allegedly, according to the Republicans. They've never been able to substantiate it, of course, but he was using the office of the vice presidency and the presidency to enrich himself. Okay, so if you feel that strongly about government corruption, about using the office of government to enrich yourself, why don't MAGA Republicans ask Donald Trump to divest himself from his businesses? Like, how is that not like a logical A to B situation here? It's just such a massive contradiction, double standard. You can't make any sense of it.
So,
you can't make sense of
worth pointing out. I'm sorry, just worth pointing out since you brought it up. I thought this is where you were going with that, Hutch.
This is topical as well. Yeah.
You went in a very productive route, and I do want to discuss that. But it is worth noting that 2 days ago, Alexander Smirnov, the so-called informant that was the keystone, according to James Comer, MAGA Republican chairman of the House Oversight Committee and the Grand Inquisitor of the Hunter Biden Inquisition.
James Comer.
The Biden crime family, the keystone to that, Smirnov, he pled guilty. He lied about everything.
He was their star witness for like a minute. I feel like that collapsed pretty quickly, didn't it? Didn't it come out like a month later that dude was like full of shit?
Smirnov? No, it was several months later that he was arrested by the FBI. And then several months after that, he pled guilty. I mean, this is where we are. This was the smoking gun. I mean, I haven't heard Rob Noor. Like, somebody should do a wellness check on Rob Noor after this, because
Rob's thriving. What do you mean? He's doing great right now.
Rob's response is obvious. What about the Steele dossier, guys? We're hypocrites on that. Okay, everyone's a hypocrite. Let's be real.
The particulars of that of the laptop story were so odd and insane at the time.
Yes.
That the MAGA people can't even fathom that the intelligence people who signed off on that letter had good faith reasons to be highly skeptical. Basically, they had advanced intelligence that Russia was going to try to interfere again, that it had to do with Ukraine, that it had to do with Hunter Biden, that it had to do with Rudy Giuliani. And then you have this story of this blind computer repairman who somehow comes into possession of this laptop, who makes a copy of the hard drive, gives it to Rudy Giuliani. So Giuliani doesn't even have the physical drive. Like, there was obvious reasons to be skeptical of it. Obviously, after the fact, those pictures were real, and
Well, and here's the thing: there were multiple attempts at a forensic audit. I know the Washington Post was one of at least 2 outlets that attempted forensic audits of the contents of the copy of the hard drive that Rudy Giuliani dispersed. And yes, there were some files there that were legitimately Hunter Biden's, but the validity of other files couldn't be ascertained. And some of the files had been digitally altered or modified, perhaps opened and closed again, or altered after the fact, after the laptop left Hunter Biden's possession. So there were
the initial New York Post story alleged like a firm substantive connection, provable connection to Joe Biden. Like that was one of the cruxes of that article. That ended up being complete bullshit. So there's a little bit of this and a little bit of that when it comes to that story.
Yeah, at the end of the day, to your point, even if everything in the Hunter Biden laptop story was taken at face value and verified, There is no concrete connection between Hunter Biden and Joe Biden. And again, going all the way back to the first point that you made, the standard, well, we don't want any sort of nepotistic or corrupt relationships, in the president's family, potentially violating the emoluments clause or violating government ethics. We don't want that. It could reflect poorly on the candidate. Well, even by that metric, Trump is just objectively worse. Jared Kushner was given a senior White House position, even though he was a security liability, according to the FBI and the intelligence community. They're like, all this guy's outstanding debt, he is a major security risk. Do not give him a security clearance. And Trump overrode his advisors and gave Kushner a security clearance and effectively made him the shadow Secretary of State. Then after he leaves office, he gets a $2 billion investment from the Saudis, when the Crown Prince overrode the Saudi wealth advisors who manage the sovereign wealth fund.
We don't even need to do the once removed situation, though. Donald Trump kept his businesses open while he was president. Do you really think all these like Chinese and Asian diplomats were renting rooms in Trump's properties because they felt like they were getting the best value, or those were the best hotels in the city? No, they were obviously doing it to curry favor with him. It's just such a blatant conflict of interest.
Yeah.
And so you can't sit here and harp on Hunter Biden trading in on his last name, which he obviously did, which wouldn't be the first time that happened, but he didn't do anything like, they never established any kind of like illegality with his business, as far as I know.
No.
The Department of Justice.
No.
There was nothing on the laptop to establish any kind of like bribery scheme or whatever. Everything that the Republicans were alleging just ended up being fucking fugazi. But if you're so concerned about that, why would you not have this expectation that Donald Trump is going to like, usually, you can
divest
put it in a blind, divest yourself. You can put it in a blind trust. He didn't do any of that. He just like handed it down.
And he's not even promising to do it now. That's the other thing.
Right, no, yeah.
I was talking about, I did a video about this earlier today, and that was mentioned in the article I was reading. And it's so I interrupted my own, monologue in the video to say, and like this, Trump throws so much unethical, corrupt shit at us. We have totally forgotten that not only did he not divest himself from his businesses, he's not even campaigning about doing it now. But if the shoe were on the other, if it had been Michael Bloomberg, or if it had been, a particularly wealthy, I can't remember who is the other billionaire who ran in the 2020? Tom Steyer. This would be front page news. President Steyer, are you going to divest yourself from your businesses? President Bloomberg, are you going to divest yourself from your businesses? But with Trump,
this came up in 2016. This came up in 2016. There were people saying like, bro, every president before you has divested themselves. Like Jimmy Carter famously divested from a peanut farm when he became president. And so people were asking these questions in 2016.
Releasing his taxes was the same thing. I mean, people had always released their taxes, and it took basically like 4 years and a whole presidential transition to get some of his tax history released. And, that's one of those things where the Democrats kind of dropped the ball on that as well. But I think that, Trump is, I think at this point, the only thing that you can really say is that it really just is the case that the conservative ecosystem of media is just truly impenetrable, right? So like a lot of people kind of like they shake their head and they, wring their arms out at like, man, like, isn't this so hypocritical? Like, how do conservatives not realize this? It's because really, people, I really do compare it to like state propaganda, right? And it's different because it's obviously not state propaganda, but state propaganda is really effective. Like when people look at like Vladimir Putin's approval rating and it says 85%, people are obviously very skeptical of that. Like, oh no, there's no way that 85% of Russians support Vladimir Putin. That's crazy. Like, let's just say that the poll is weird and it's push polled or whatever. People are scared. The real number might be like 65, 70%, right? Because when the state just, broadcasts to people information, there's just a really large percentage of people that just kind of take that to be true. And in this case, we don't have state propaganda, but we have like conservative media ecosystem propaganda that is just totally impenetrable. It seems like where like people are really just so bought in. Poll after poll seems to indicate this. Like, for instance, what could possibly, for the people skeptical of this, what could possibly explain this happening other than what I'm describing? Conservatives going from trusting the election at a 25% rate to like a 90% rate. And the only difference was that Trump happened to win the election, right? what that tells me is that they simply believed something because it didn't benefit their personal political side. They believed the propaganda. And the thing that proved that the propaganda wasn't true, or at least this time for them, was that Trump just happened to win, right? Whereas the Democrats, you do see a slight decrease in the confidence of the election because of Trump winning, but you don't see Democrats go from 70% supporting the election to 20%. You see them go from like 65% to like 55%. So it happens on both sides, but the degree is just clearly so different.
It's the same about sentiment about the economy. I mean, we talked about this before. Paul Krugman, Nobel Prize winning economist, and until recently a contributor to the New York Times, he's talked about this extensively. The consumer sentiment in the post-Clinton political world, you see swings with the Democratic Party, to be sure, but they are much more wild, consistently wild about the perceptions of the economy when it comes to Republicans. Republicans are much more likely to aggressively skew their perceptions based on who is in power. And so that's why I categorically reject this false equivalence. I mean, I'm sorry, and I can say this because I'm not running for office. As a general proposition, Democrats have a tighter grasp on the political reality than Republicans. Republicans are much more cultish and irrational as a general proposition in their perceptions on things, be it institutions like the election or the economy. I just want to say here too, somebody said this about you, Econoboy. Ha ha ha, a lefty saying conservative media is propaganda. Ha ha. I'll let Econoboy respond, but I'll also say, if you disagree with any of us, the link is in the chat. I had it pinned here. You can just use the link and hop in. And we're happy to chat with you, especially while we're waiting on Peace Code. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, look, both sides engage in their own propaganda war. I mean, obviously, I wouldn't really take it to be the case that a political messaging campaign is entirely honest on either side. I mean, I certainly wouldn't take that to be the case with mainstream news outlets or alternative media or anything like that. The only point that I'm talking about is just the grasp that the media ecosystems seem to have on the respective audiences, right? Where what seems to be the case is that conservatives are much more engaged with conservative media, right? And you can see this in the viewership numbers. Just look at how many viewers Fox News gets versus like CNN, MSNBC, ABC. Like Fox News does very well. Like conservatives just tend to be much more, seemingly at least, engaged in the media that they consume. And, you know, to be fair, again, they do seem to be a little bit more susceptible or a little bit more likely presently to believe what that media says. And again, like Josiah said, I listened to a podcast from 538. They had an economist who was in charge of the Michigan Consumer Sentiment Survey, and she said the exact same thing, right? She said, well, look, like in our data, what we see is that there's certainly a difference in both parties' political persuasions between how they feel about the economy. But it's certainly the case that Republicans are so much more sensitive to who's in office with regards to how they view the economy and their economic outlook. And look, I mean, conservatives can get offended by that, but that's just, you can look at the lines as they change. And what you'll see is Democrats, when a Republican takes office, Democrats are more likely to say the economy is bad. But Republicans are so much more likely to say that the economy is bad when a Democrat takes office. And that's not, that's not good, obviously. And it's just more of a criticism for present day Republicans than present day Democrats, right?
There's an old study back from 2012. I put it in the chat, but I mean, this was 12 years ago, 13 years ago. So things might have changed since then in one direction or another. But back then in 2012, if you watched no news whatsoever, you were better informed than a regular Fox News viewer, which is just something that I've always found just eminently believable, first of all, and obviously hilarious.
Yeah, I couldn't log into my Bloomberg account for whatever reason. It's paywalled. But I was going to bring that up. As a matter of fact, Jon Stewart famously referred to that study when he sparred with Chris Wallace, when Chris Wallace was still at Fox News back in, I think it was 2012, 2013, something like that.
And I saw similar stuff about, I mean, look, here's the problem, right? Here's the problem for people who are angry when we say things like, oh, Fox News is a propaganda outlet. Fox News viewers are less informed. I think I saw a similar survey at one point that showed that Jon Stewart, the Daily Show viewers, were much more informed than like your average Fox News viewer. The problem, guys, is that there are facts of the matter, and we apply our political ideology to those facts of the matter. So what do I mean by that? What I mean is that I think I have a set of reasons to believe in the things that I believe in that I think are relatively factual or sort of foundationally very philosophically sound. And I take all of those things and I put them into a basket and I call myself a Democrat because that's just like the label that makes sense for me. Now, if we could divine into the universe, as angry as it would make centrists, if we could divine into the universe the truth of political questions, like, hey, like, what's the best minimum wage? What's the best healthcare system? Let's just say we could divine the truth of all of those political questions. It probably wouldn't be the case that, oh, Republicans are totally correct on half the issues and Democrats are totally correct on half the issues. And maybe there's a lot of room in between where we need to moderate on a lot of policies. My guess, my sense of things, is that the facts would tend to align with a left of center worldview, not necessarily socialist, far left Marxist types, but probably left of center. You know, your trickle down economics seems to not work. Your very, very conservative social policy seems to go out of fashion over time. And so it's probably just the case that, you know, a liberal worldview is more correct. And it's one of the reasons why liberal news outlets, you know, when you look at the sort of information density of their coverage and like who's more likely to be informed, part of it is that liberals might just be more likely to be informed because the liberal worldview is correct. And part of it might be that like liberal show hosts just tend to report on the truth more often because the truth just happens to align more so with their worldview. It goes back to that old saying of the truth has a liberal bias. That's just kind of true. Like, I don't know what people think. Like when you see like, oh yeah, like all these PhD economists, like it seems like when you poll them on economic issues, they're basically left of center. Like it just seems weird to me to look at that and be like, it's all those economists that are wrong about all these issues and it's Donald Trump who's correct. Like, I don't know. This is like believing in Donald Trump instead of your doctor, right?
Which the polling shows that that's what Republicans do. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Hutch.
And it's not that people in the liberal media or left-leaning media or whatever, it's not like they never make mistakes. It's not like they never get stories wrong. Dan Rather's like a really famous example of that. It ended his career. It's just you cannot find the equivalent of the Dominion lawsuit in liberal media. That you just can't find that equivalent on MSNBC, on CNN, on ABC, on CBS.
Hutch, I'm going to play the devil's advocate.
You're going to talk about George Stephanopoulos.
Hutch. Now, I'm sorry, but George Stephanopoulos had to apologize, and ABC had to pay $15 million in a defamation settlement. Hutch.
There's a lot of reasonable speculation that ABC did that to avoid losing access, which makes perfect sense. The facts of that story are it was sometime around April. George Stephanopoulos on air characterized the E. Jean Carroll case as a jury having found Donald Trump liable for rape. Technically, with New York law, the way that they classify rape, that wasn't accurate, but colloquially, it was entirely accurate. And the judge in the case said, he clarified that the jury had affirmed essentially that he had committed rape. And so ABC had like such a slam dunk case to fight this defamation. And it seems like their calculus was like, let's just pay the $15 million and then we don't have to worry about losing access, is what seems like it happened.
Yeah. So
but even this, guys, even this does not in any universe remotely compare to the Dominion lawsuit and to the text messages that we saw from Tucker Carlson and Discovery from that case. There's no equivalent of that in any kind of like left-leaning media space.
It's just a false equivalence because it seems like there is, it just seems like Republicans are much more susceptible to basically believing just like exactly what the conservative news apparatus tells them, which means that, and you know, all these things kind of cause each other in some regards, which means that there is seemingly a very, very tight relationship with basically like Republican pollsters and politicians and sort of political allies, and like what actually just gets covered and what gets said on Fox News. And again, like the Dominion lawsuit, it's not just that it's a huge defamation lawsuit that, you know, favored what you could say is like the Democratic point of view, which is that voter fraud was all a lie and it never really happened, which is true. But it's also what it exposed was that so many Fox News anchors know for a fact that what they are saying is a lie. They know that it's propaganda. Like that, if you read the Dominion lawsuit, that is the craziest thing to come out of the Dominion lawsuit, besides just the total amount of money that they were liable for, was that a bunch of Fox News anchors were on record like, yep, this is a lie. This is complete bullshit. But, it's what Trump wants, I guess, so we got to do it. Like, that's a
They
crazy
had
thing.
Tucker Carlson in text messages calling Trump a literal demon, an actual demon. And when he says demon, he means like a literal demon. He's fucking crazy.
A demon grabbed his foot.
He's a crazy person. Right. He's a fucking crazy person, it turns out.
And
if it came out that Rachel Maddow, like in her private text messages, was calling Joe Biden a literal demon, that would end her career. She would not have a platform anymore in MSNBC. Her viewers would reject her. They exist in totally different. Right. But the point is like he seamlessly transitioned into a highly successful pro-Trump, pro-MAGA podcaster. I'm sure he's making a lot of money there. Maybe not as much as he was making at Fox, but he didn't lose any of his audience. They either don't know that he was calling Donald Trump a demon, or they found their way to rationalize through that.
Yeah, so I think so much of this is just actually that certainly elected Republicans, but I think, MAGA influencers, and quite frankly, I actually think a substantial portion of the voting base, I just think they don't care. Not only do they not care about the hypocrisy, I think it actually titillates a lot of them. I really believe that, because what really cemented this in my mind, no, 100%. What really cemented this in my mind was Brian Tyler Cohen was on Piers Morgan maybe about a month ago, and they were having a conversation, and the president of the Heritage Foundation, who was a key architect, Kevin Roberts is his name, a key architect of Project 2025, Brian Tyler Cohen was having a discussion with them about Project 2025, and I can't remember exactly because it's been a month, but basically, Brian Tyler Cohen made the point that Kevin Roberts was being very hypocritical. And Piers Morgan said, okay, well, Kevin, do you want to respond to that? And Kevin Roberts smirked and he said, yeah, it sounds like Brian's a sore loser. And I think for a lot of them, that's really what it is. I think they like owning the libs. And I think they recognize that hypocrisy and grading Trump on a curve is a really good vector by which they can do that, because hypocrisy drives me nuts. I think it drives Hutch nuts. I think it drives you nuts to some extent, Accountable, even though you're very zen. But for us, it's not just that they have policy prescriptions and advocate for things with which we disagree. It's the shameless hypocrisy in doing it. Like that's one of my beefs with the Trump immunity decision. It's if you genuinely believe that any president should be afforded presidential immunity, I disagree with that. I think that's un-American. But what's worse than that is that if you don't believe that Barack Obama or Joe Biden should be entitled to presidential immunity, you think that Trump should. Like, I have a deep contempt for that, because not only is it un-American, you're just being a fucking loser hypocrite. And we actually see it reflected in the polls, where most Americans think that presidents shouldn't have absolute immunity or presidential immunity. But if you change the polling question from U.S. president to President Trump, then Republican support for presidential immunity skyrockets. That's because
his brand is built on grievance. His brand is the foundational principle of his brand is grievance. He's being persecuted. That's it.
Right.
And everything else springs from that. So
no, I know, but I guess what I'm saying is I think a lot of them know they're being hypocritical, and I think it does. I think for at least some of them, obviously not all of them, I think it titillates them. I think they love knowing that they can say something on Monday and totally contradict themselves on Wednesday. And I actually think Piers Morgan, who is not like MAGA in the classical sense, I think he's an example of somebody who is aware that Trump is being hypocritical.
Oh, he's an enabler.
And that he enables, right. But I think it amuses him to know that it's like, from Piers's perspective, he thinks it's funny that we know that he knows he's grading Trump on a curve, and he just doesn't care. It's like, fuck you. I can do whatever I win. It doesn't matter.
His primary function is not informing his viewers. That's not his priority. It's like, like when I fire up a stream, like I try to, like, if I get something wrong, I admit it. If I don't know, if I'm not familiar with the subject matter, I'll avoid speaking about it. And, I put effort into making sure that, like, I'm talking about things that are actual facts. And if I get something wrong, I admit it. That Piers Morgan wakes up every morning and it's just about, like, how do I curry favor with Trump so I can get an interview down the line? And how can I stoke divisions to get the most amount of views? And that's just, unfortunately, the promise of social media back in the day, like 15 years ago, I remember being so bullish on social media, making people smarter. And I don't know if you guys had the same kind of perspective, but I was like, this is such a unique opportunity. The internet makes it so it's going to be so much more difficult to lie to people. That was my honest thought back in 2010. It's like the truth is going to be easier to get out. And, if the government lies to us about like marijuana, for example, it's just harder to fool people if they have all the access of, 3,000 years of recorded history at their fingertips on a smartphone. And I ended up just being so laughably wrong because I didn't consider the profit motive because it just wasn't as like pronounced back then. It was still this burgeoning kind of new thing. And, that's how you get Tim Pool. It's how you get Candace Owens. It's how you get Piers Morgan. It's how you get Jank to a certain degree. There were people in chat. Somebody left a super chat saying that the equivalent of Dominion was Russiagate. No. I do not agree with that whatsoever. It depends on like what you consider Russiagate to be. When I think of Russiagate, I think of the fact that Donald Trump stood up at a podium in 2016 and said, Russia, if you're listening, I hope you can find Hillary's emails and I'm sure our press will reward you mightily. And then 4 hours later, they fucking did it. They did that shit. Right. And then they funneled it to WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks posted 2,000 email tranches per day for the final month of the election. And if you were to imagine a thought experiment where Hillary Clinton asked Iran to hack Donald Trump and they fucking did, they would have been just as furious.
Or Vice President Harris.
Whole situation.
Or Vice President Harris, because Trump's campaign was hacked by the Iranians, I believe, during this past election cycle. So imagine, to your point, Hutch, if Kamala Harris, during a campaign speech, said, Iran, if you're watching, it'd be really great if you would hack Trump's emails. And 4 hours later, they did that. That would be not only all over. It would be every Piers Morgan panel. It would be all over Fox News, Tim Pool, the Daily Wire, their constituent creators. But also, Jake Tapper would be like breaking news. He and Wolf Blitzer and Anderson Cooper would convene and talk about, the moral decay of the Democratic Party. And it wouldn't just be right-wing media. It would be so-called mainstream media, even though right-wing media is mainstream media. But that's because both the right and the mainstream hold Democrats to a higher standard than Republicans. And it's so gross. And I just want to say, to your point about the super chat, the Dem equivalent of Dominion was Russiagate. Not a single Trump campaign member was convicted of anything related to Russian collusion. This embarrassment was arguably
collusion is not a fucking crime. If you read the Mueller report, Mueller said straight up, we didn't look into collusion because there's no criminal statute for collusion. What the Mueller investigation looked into was whether or not anyone from the Trump campaign actually assisted Russia in their hacking efforts. And they found no such ties. And so a MAGA person hears that, or maybe they didn't hear that, and they think, oh, no collusion. The collusion happened after the fact. We learned that Don Jr. took a meeting with fucking literal Russian agent who because he thought that they were going to give him Hillary's emails. You had all kinds of improper contacts with Russian officials that the Trump administration, the incoming to transition team, were initially denying. Like people like Jeff Sessions just straight up lied about having contacts with Russian operatives. There's a really famous clip of him being grilled by Kamala Harris in a Senate confirmation hearing about this thing where he said she's making him nervous. And so there were all kinds of again, if the shoe was on the other foot and this was the Democrats flirting with an adversarial nation who is invested literally in the downfall of America, Republicans would have shit themselves. They would have absolutely shit themselves and pissed themselves and vomited with rage. Right. But they don't seem to connect the dots. Like in their minds, it's like, oh, it's fine that he invited an adversarial nation to.
You guys should talk to Rob Noor about this. He'll set you straight. All of us have had multiple conversations with Rob Noor. So, yeah. A couple of other things. People are asking about the Kids for Cash clemency from President Biden, the judge Callahan. And for context, that was a Pennsylvania judge there was a scandal. I can't even remember how many years ago, but basically he was involved in the scheme to send minors to for-profit prisons in exchange for kickbacks.
He got paid millions of dollars to do that. Yeah.
And President Biden granted him clemency as part of this 1,500 commutations and clemencies and pardons. I think there were 39 actual pardons, but 1,500 grants of clemency or sentence commutations. And it was the biggest in a single day by far. But there's been understandable controversy over this. But the reason that Biden did it was because they didn't look at the specifics of the case. The only criteria were good behavior and length of time served already. I totally agree that this is one of those cases where, damn, there's probably a reason that people should be looking at specific details of cases. This, really corrupt, predatory display of white collar crime and an abuse of authority. I don't think that the judge should have had his sentence commuted at all or been granted clemency.
So I didn't love that.
Yeah, I understand the heat on Biden for that. But just to be clear, I'm not saying this makes it too much better, but it's not like Biden reviewed the specific details and said, fuck yeah, this is a guy who, this is an underdog. This is a guy who is a hero of the people. They got the broad overview. This person was sentenced to this number of years. They served this many. Reports are that they have good behavior, no issues. And so as part of this blanket pass. So yeah, people are right to criticize Biden for this, but
Ukulele, hold on. He's in the chat. Collusion was absolutely discovered. We're talking about clandestine meetings with an adversarial nation because they thought that they were going to get Hillary's hacked emails. So the question of collusion was never addressed with Robert Mueller. There's no laws against technically what they did. Like you can, if you're
collude. Well, it's not that you can collude with a foreign adversary. It's just that collusion is not a crime on the books for which you can be prosecuted. If you if you engage in a criminal conspiracy with a foreign adversary to influence the outcome of an election, I'm sure there are statutes for which you can be prosecuted. But collusion,
right, that's what Mueller looked into specifically, was conspiracy, was a direct link, was someone on Trump's campaign assisting Russia, like what Chelsea Manning got incarcerated for, because
Ukulele is, this again, it's not really worth responding in depthly about, because what I said that I really disagree with Josiah about earlier is kind of emblematic of like Ukulele's chat just now, was that while I do agree that there's probably some percentage of sort of Republicans who, like Tucker Carlson, obviously, who just like know that they're lying and they don't really care. They just think it's like a good strategy or whatever.
I know what, to be clear, I'm sorry. I'm not saying that. I think some don't care. I think some enjoy the flagrancy, the
some might also like it.
Yeah.
Some might also like it. I think that however, there's just a large portion of the MAGA base that, they probably truthfully don't have very strong political opinions. They just lean conservative for one way or another, so they vote for Republicans. But then there's people like Ukulele who are just like Ukulele, I just challenge you, like just Google Mueller report. It's not even that long of a thing. Like it's really a truly
very
readable document. Yeah, but it's readable. Like it takes a day to read, just Google Mueller report, throw it in an AI and ask it to summarize it for you if reading it is too much.
Claude, somebody mentioned Rob Noor. Claude.
Yeah. Just read these things, because it's just frustrating, because it's like, I know that you're trapped in a media cycle that you actively refuse to do anything to get out of. Look, at least we can say that we regularly engage with people like Rob Noor and conservative family members and stuff like this. But it's important to also engage in just the actual written material of what's going on. And I don't even know how you could call this cope, right? Like the Mueller report is what it was. This was like 5 years ago that this happened.
Senate Republicans came out with their own report, and they laid out quite clearly that Donald Trump asked for Russia's help in the election. They offered their help, and he gleefully accepted it. These were Senate Republicans back in like 2017. Yeah. This is not something that anyone seriously disputes. And again, I pose the hypothetical: if it was Hillary asking North Korea to hack Donald Trump, what would you be saying?
Or fucking Canada. And that's my point. That's my point to Ukulele. He's the one who should cope and seethe, because we all know, we just know this is the case, that he would be furious if the shoe were on the other foot, if it had been Hillary Clinton or, again, Vice President Harris saying, hey, Iran, it'd be really great if you hacked Donald Trump. And if she met, or if members of her campaign
they'd be calling for her to be executed.
Right.
They'd be calling it treason.
Ukulele would be demanding her execution.
Right.
Summary judgment. Right. And if we responded with, well, listen, when Vice President Harris met with Iranian assets, you can't prove that those meetings were about collusion. You have no, she's the vice president of the United States. She could be meeting with foreign adversaries on diplomatic overtures.
No, but they did establish at the meeting that he took with
I
Russian
understand
operative.
that. I understand
They no, like Don Jr. even testified. Jared Kushner, like they testified and they said, like, yeah, we took the meeting because we thought it was about like the hacked emails. It ended up being about the Magnitsky Act, which was about like sanctions preventing adoptions, like Russian adoptions or something like that. I don't know.
Right. But the Econoboy, in my opinion, Ukulele kind of furthers my point, which is we know if the shoe were on the other foot with all the facts exactly the same, the guy who's saying you don't have audio evidence or video evidence that these specific meetings were a Trump campaign official actively colluding with a Russian official to influence the outcome. Set everything aside. The standard would magically change if the shoe was on the other foot.
Kevin McCarthy back in 2016 or 2017 was caught on a hot mic saying he literally thinks that Donald Trump is on Russia's payroll.
Yeah.
And somehow he survived that. Then he went on to become the leader of the MAGA movement in the House. Like, this is what I mean. Well, like, they face no consequences for the shit that they say.
I think that, so yes and no. Like, I think obviously, again, there's some people that are just hypocrites and they just, for whatever reason, they just, are hypocrites and they act this way. But I think there's also just a lot of people who they just give, like, for instance, like the conversations that I would have with my family, like if I brought that up with my family members and I said like, oh, what do you think about Trump? Like fucking Jimmy Carter had to put his shit in a trust and he just owned a small peanut farm or whatever the typical line is. And Trump had to, it was actively managing all of his businesses at the same time. And, what they would say is they would just generally give Trump like a really huge benefit of the doubt. Right. Like they wouldn't necessarily say like, oh, that's not true. He actually did do those things, or letting his son manage it is that's fine. They would just generally say, they would like message towards, yeah. Like, whatever. I get what you're saying. But like Trump is a big businessman and like he has to do this. And like we don't think he's personally corrupt. And, I think that's really like that's why I think a lot of the times it comes off as just like blatant hypocrisy when you talk to average people like Ukulele, because I think what it really is not necessarily blatant hypocrisy. It's more like, I just like really, really trust Trump.
Let's pick a different topic. I'm curious what you take on this. Because again, to me, a big one is presidential immunity. Now, I want you to consider a counterfactual in which it is a black Democrat, let's say Barack Obama, and his lawyers are in front of a DC appellate court and then the United States Supreme Court saying things like, well, if the president orders SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival, you shouldn't necessarily be able to prosecute for that. Or if the president attempts a coup, that's not necessarily, not an official duty. It could be. I want you to imagine, you tell me how Fox News, Lactoid, like every person, Rob North, doesn't matter. Every person you've ever seen that you know personally, or that you've just seen from afar, Jonathan Turley, Fox News analyst, Piers Morgan, whatever, how would they have reacted?
It would have been like the equivalent of like the 2020 riots. Like they literally would have been rioting in the street.
No, they would have freaked out, but I'm just saying that there's
what do you think that's attributable to? What do you think the difference is? Because to me, it is purely, it's not even necessarily that they trust Trump per se. To me, it is a cultish. Yes, it is a cultish devotion to Trump. But to me, I don't think these people are so stupid that they haven't thought about what if the shoe were on the other foot. That takes just average.
I totally did. No, you're totally wrong.
I think it's just, they're like, there is not some sort of moral there's no force compelling us to be consistent. They've seen Donald Trump be rewarded for his hypocrisy. I think they've just embraced it. That's part of the MAGA tradition. If presidential immunity is something that, you reject presidential immunity when it's Donald Trump in 2020 as the sitting president threatening to prosecute Barack Obama, a former president. I didn't see these motherfuckers stand up and go, no, Donald, we can't prosecute former presidents. That would violate the Constitution. They were like, fuck yeah, give me those goddamn prosecutions of former presidents.
Yeah, well, I mean,
then it's Trump, and it's like, no, we have to have total immunity. I think they know it, and I think they. I think
No.
that they embrace it.
I just think that generally speaking, people in our space, like, I don't know how to describe it necessarily. Like, however informed you think the average voter is to the people watching this podcast, divided by 10, like divided by a large amount. Even if you say, oh, no, I don't think the average voter is very well informed, still divided by 10, right? Like, again, we see these polls all the time. Like, we see, like, oh, half of people can't name the 3 branches of government. Oh, only like 85% of people know who the president is. A third of people just like don't even participate in our political process, right? Like they just, oh, presidential election, whatever. I got shit to do on Wednesday, and I'm not really too concerned about it. Like, I just think that there really is just a lot of ignorance. Like, I think that in terms of the composition of people who would be hypocritical, like on paper, like they have a different standard for 2 different people. I just think there's a composition of those people, part of which is what you're describing, Josiah. It's just like genuine hypocrisy. They just literally just want to crush the Democrats. They don't care. They would support a dictator if he said he was a Republican. There's some percentage of people that would say that. Like, I don't know, maybe that's like 10% of the country or something like that, which is maybe a scarily high figure. But but then there's like the other 20% of the country that voted for Trump, which is about 40% of voters, who they probably just are extremely ill-informed. I mean, like, for instance, when you look at the exit polling and you disaggregate based on how high information the voters are, the lowest information voters, it's like Trump plus 14, and the highest information voters, it's like Kamala plus 10, right? Which is to say that at the very least, we could say that if you are a high information voter, you are much more likely to support Kamala Harris, right? Without, normatively.
Or if you're highly engaged as well. So if you participate in midterm elections and special elections.
Yeah, and so I just have a hard time ascribing bad faith to just like most like MAGA voters, I guess you could say. I think that a lot of it just comes down to the power of media propaganda and media ecosystems and algorithmic sorting and things like that, combined with what is just generally speaking like a problem that all democracies have, which is just pretty low information voters, right?
Well, I'm gonna get a little bit darker with it. Okay, so like there's some of it is like, you're absolutely right. There's a really decent percentage of people in this country that are completely disconnected from politics, and this is kind of like a normal thing across democracies all over the world. A lot of people, they just focus on their immediate surroundings, their family, their jobs, their careers, their church, their whatever, their communities. But for the people that are to your point about people that would make, they would accept immunity for Trump and not for Obama. A lot of these people, it goes deeper than a cult of personality. For a lot of these people, they have sincerely given up on democracy. The norms no longer matter. The norms that are meant to protect our institution from corruption no longer matter. The laws technically don't matter anymore. Donald Trump gets carte blanche to do whatever he wants in their eyes because they view him as a necessary disruptor. When Barack Obama was elected in 2008, that was deeply, deeply traumatic for these people. When he got reelected in 2012, that was just salt on the wound. They were convinced that this guy was an Islamist who was going to destroy Christianity. They were convinced that he was a communist that was going to destroy capitalism. And so by the time Trump came in, kind of off the heels of the Tea Party movement, there was an appetite for a strong man to come in and just say, fuck it. Like, the Constitution, laws, whatever, norms, give me a fucking break. It just doesn't matter to them because they don't want the American democracy anymore. And I don't know how many, like, what percentage of the country that applies to, maybe 10, 15%, but it's not zero. And there's a lot of them.
So we've got Joe who's joined. I have no idea who he is. I assume he's somebody who disagrees. So we're going to bring in Joe. Joe, do you disagree about something, sir? Joe, you're on the air.
Give him 3 more seconds, all right? We can't dilly-dally.
Joe's gone. Goodness. Joe left.
Rest in peace.
Fuck Joe. Get him out of here.
Yeah.
I've seen polling.
Well, hang on real quick. I'm sorry. Just real quick. I just want to remind people that if you disagree about anything, the link, it's browser based. Just copy the link on the banner here. Disagree, hop in, link. Here's the link, studio.restream, blah, blah, blah. And you can join.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think there's people talking shit in chat. So here's your chance. Sorry.
I think there's a lot of truth to what Hutch is saying as well, right? We live in a democracy, but the approval of like democracy as a system is not 100%, and there's going to be some decently high percentage of people who just support, it's almost like they're pure platformists, right? Where it's like, I don't care how my policies get enacted, just so long as they do, right? That general sentiment that, like, President Bush said when he was president, he said something along the lines of, it'd be a lot easier of a job if I was an emperor instead of a president, which is probably true in some sense, but it wouldn't be, it wouldn't make for great institution building. So, what are you going to do? I think that the job of Democrats is really to not, I just don't think, and we see this in the exit polls, I don't really think there is much hope for the Democrats to like change significantly the minds of people who vote for Trump. I think that it's just going to come down to, what do you think the best path is to engage non-engaged voters and to engage those like marginally engaged voters, like voters that have
are we
a
at a
50%
point
chance of voting or not? Yeah, go on.
Are we at a point where things just have to get bad? Like, I don't want to believe that, but is that where we're at?
I still don't know if that'll work, quite candidly. I mean, listen, I'm again, we're not running for office, so we can afford to be candid in ways that candidates themselves cannot. Of course, that's something that went through my mind. Like, maybe, and there's an op-ed, I think, in the New York Times or Washington Post. It's on my list of links somewhere to read. Or maybe it was The Hill, where the idea is, Democrats, liberals, and progressives just need to let the Trump administration play out. Don't come to the Republicans' rescue. So if they have issues passing a budget, if we're on the verge of a government shutdown, Democrats should just sit on their hands and say, you all have the numbers, you have the margin, you have the mandate, fucking make it happen. And then dedicate all of their political capital to simply exploiting the issue and punishing relentlessly Republicans for their failures. I think that that's a perfectly valid question to ask, and certainly something that Republicans would do, again, if the shoe were on the other foot. However, as I've said before, and I'll say again, I understand that Trump has to, to obey some laws of political gravity, right? It's almost like, again, I've used example, he's not just leaving the planet, but he can leap further and he descends slower. The rules warp around him. I'm not convinced that if things get bad, that Trump would necessarily get the blame for it, or Republicans. And quite frankly, I don't trust Democrats as a general proposition to effectively make that case. It's really frustrating.
Americans blamed him for COVID incompetence in 2020. It's why he lost. Americans blamed him for threatening their healthcare systems in 2018. It's why Democrats had a good midterm performance. So
yeah, but respectfully, Hutch, I mean, come on. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that he's immune from gravity, but also look what they did in 2024. I mean, that's what I'm saying.
People have short attention spans. They have short memories.
No, you're right. But the thing is, though, is that, again, Trump is probably always going to have like 60 or 70 million people in this country who are willing to go out and vote for him, like, personally. Now, how much, because obviously in theory, he won't be the candidate next time around. Like, it'll be like JD Vance or Don Jr. or something. So it's hard to say how much his cult of personality is transferable, but there's always going to be like tens of millions of people that vote for the Republicans, literally no matter what. Unfortunately, that is the case. And that's the same with the Democrats as well. There's just like some solid base. However, what's worth saying is that there's going to be like an additional tens of millions of people who are probably inspired to come out and vote against Trump, especially if things get really bad. And we saw that in 2020, like Joe Biden, who, bunker Biden, never came out and campaigned, like not a particularly great general election candidate. He got the most votes of anyone who's ever run for president. And it was pretty much entirely because Trump just inspired so many people who hated him to come out and vote, right? And I think similarly, if he does universal tariffs and mass deportations and we have a great recession, then, he's probably still going to be polling at 38% approval rating. But, the Democrats are probably going to get 85 million votes in the next election because it really pisses off that many unengaged people and that many sort of marginally attached, sort of like tilt Democrat people to come out and vote for whoever the Democratic.
I wish I had your confidence, but I'm sorry. I should say, so we have two guests here. One, somebody
I'm not a guest.
One, somebody that we respect.
I'm not a guest.
God, your mic works. Oh my God, your mic works.
One shot of his mic.
Oh wait, hold on. There's a.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Oh, okay.
That's Ronald. That's actually who I was talking about. Somebody we respect immensely, and also Pisco's here. So hang on, real quick. Set up Pisco. Before you jumped in, we said that we were going to open the stream up to people who disagree with us. So here's Ronald. He joined the same time as you. What's up, Ronald? What's your disagreement?
So not necessarily a disagreement, more of a question.
Kick him
What
out.
do you say to? Oh no! Wait! This is, I think, important. What do you say to Gen X / millennials who witnessed 9/11, the Iraq War, who really fell into that conspiracy rabbit hole, who believed the crazy Obama stuff, and like the recent like lithium mine hurricane? How do you re-engage those people into reality?
You don't.
How do you think that happens?
Fucking good luck with that.
They're lost to us.
I have no
That's
idea.
what I'm saying. Like it's all going to depend. Like, I don't think that Democrats should. I think this was just one of the lessons that I think we have to learn, especially from the Kamala campaign. Like, trying to engage the imaginary Nikki Haley Republican who like would vote for Democrats, it just seems like a waste of time. Like, that's not going to work, right? Like the way that you win elections past the year 2020, it seems, is basically just trying to get more people on your side to come out and vote, and trying to engender either like a fear in those people to motivate them to vote for you, like they fear the other side, or just like a positive, oh, you know, I have like proactive reasons for supporting these people and coming out to vote. I don't really think, like, if somebody's of the mindset that, oh, you know, George Soros is funding DEI in our schools, it's like, I would never waste time talking to a person like this if I was a canvasser. I'd be like, okay, have a good one. I just go to the next house, because most likely your impact on the election is just way more likely to actually be felt by just talking to the next house and not engaging with this person who's clearly kind of a nut job, right?
Yeah, the social psychologists and psychiatrists. I mean, there's extensive research into de-radicalizing cultists, and the amount of effort it takes to deprogram or to de-radicalize one person. You're talking about an extraordinary investment in time and manpower. It's not something that can be casually done. It usually involves multiple interventions from trusted family members over an extensive period of time.
Total change of environment.
Yeah,
like,
and when you're talking about tens of millions of Americans, that's just not possible. So, yeah, I'm not sure, but unfortunately, I think you just have to marginalize.
What's this guy's name?
It's
Ronald.
like
Ronald.
it's like
Reagan.
Doomsday. It's like Doomsday and Batman v Superman. Like
That's how it feels.
The more you like try to hurt it, the stronger it gets. And so the more you push back on crazy conspiracy theories, people tend to dig their heels in even more. So like you can just bombard them with facts that completely contradict.
We've spoken about this.
Well, no, Hannah, just real quick. I'm sorry. I mean, that's a great metaphor, but I think it's like the rise of Skywalker, where Rey kind of fucking
Jesus Christ.
No, your guys' sequel takes are garbage. Don't even.
Wait.
There's more guys. Don't lump me in with him, please.
We've spoken about this before.
Right,
how
fair.
People, interpersonally, you can do a lot to try and assuage your conservative family members' fears of Democrats and stuff like that, because you're a trusted face to your family members. But in terms of what I was going to say, like in terms of what you can do in your advocacy or in your public facing life, unfortunately, I just think it's very little. You know, if you go to a meeting or if you knock on a door and it happens to be like a MAGA, like QAnon type person, it's like, all right, well, fucking have a good life, I guess.
Yeah, maybe I just don't know how to talk to these people. My father is a rough case. It's very
Pisco streams and debates all the time. Have your father debate Pisco.
No, I don't. I don't do well.
Ronald's father. Yes or no?
No. Ronald, listen to me.
Have Pisco move in with Ronald's father.
Listen to me, Ronald. You're not going to change your dad's mind. If you want to have a relationship with your dad, you should probably not talk politics. That's my advice.
You're correct. I 100% agree.
Right.
Well,
it's a rough one out there,
Ronald. I hate to do this to you, buddy.
No,
wait, Ronald.
Wait, whoa! I'm about to talk.
Oh, wait. Sorry,
you people.
Okay.
There's other people. Sorry, like Pisco and Hutch get the last words with Ronald.
Wait. So I want. What do you want to say, Kanabe?
I was just gonna say, Pisco Bay. Ronald, if you could just tell, when 2028 rolls around, there's this update in the election. The election's actually on Wednesday now. You can wait until Wednesday to vote. I would say that's probably something you could encourage your dad. Be sure he gets his vote in on Wednesday.
On Wednesday, yeah, of course.
Yeah,
of course.
Yeah, of course.
All right,
Pisco.
Have a good one, Ronald.
What the fuck? You just wanted to say goodbye to Ronald?
Yeah,
no, but it's cool. It's cool.
No, I'm saying you get the last word.
Can I leave you with a question?
Leave us with a question.
I'm out. We know that the incoming Trump administration is crazy. We know the nominations are probably gonna get through, unfortunately, as much as none of us want that. what's the red line? I don't know if you're allowed to answer that on YouTube, but like, what's the red line? At what point
You're cutting off family? What are you doing? What are you asking?
No, wait a minute.
The red line.
The revolution line.
I don't know if we can talk about that.
No.
If we can't, understand, and I respect it. I'm just curious.
I think I've mentioned before, like what could Trump do where I'd want to like actually flee the country? You know, and I think that the answer is if he does like a Muslim registry, like that's something he talked about in 2016, 15. Like if he actually says like Muslim people have to register with the government, I'd be like, all right, Muslim wife of mine, we need to leave this place. This is no longer safe for your
we could put it this way. Like if Biden had actually stolen the election in 2020, January 6th would have been perfectly justified. So we'll put it that way.
Absolutely agree. Absolutely agree.
Well, listen, as Pisco will tell you, we'll leave you this. We don't have to worry about that because the MAGA populace would rise up and hold Trump in check. So thanks, Ronald. Appreciate you, buddy. All right, we've got two others who want to join. Let's see. We've got Will.
Pisco no longer wearing his democracy hat. Telling.
I know, it's somewhere else.
Hey, what's up, Will?
Hi. So I think this is mostly towards Pisco, but my disagreement is I don't like all this. We need to go back to the old norms vibes that I'm getting from you of like, you know, we need to go back to when, you know, we weren't doing everything by executive order and we were doing everything through legislation. That just seems like it's not the way of the future. And it doesn't work with the high-speed media that we live in today.
I don't understand what you think my position to be. I'm been a proponent that the presidency is by far the most important branch to vote on. I think the president should be very, very, very based. But there are like some things that I don't agree with, which is like doing illegal shit. You know, that's kind of
where I disagree with you on. It's
okay.
I think what the president should do
got to do some illegal
shit. They should sign executive orders, assuming they're, and then let the Supreme Court decide if they're not. And until the Supreme Court decides that they're not illegal, then go for it. Do it.
I don't think that that's delegable. I think that every branch of government has a responsibility to consider whether their action is constitutional or not.
Pisco doesn't believe that, by the way.
He doesn't.
But he doesn't.
He doesn't believe that. No, thank you. I was thinking the same day. I was like, this motherfucker right here.
I 100% believe that.
He doesn't.
All three branches have a responsibility to obey the Constitution, but absolutely no interpretive authority whatsoever. That's for our God kings at the Supreme Court.
No. That is not the case. So a president, for example, when they veto a bill, can say, I am vetoing this because it's unconstitutional. Or a president could say, the Supreme Court said that, you know, it's constitutional for me to do this thing, but I disagree, and so I'm not going to do it. That's one thing. But what we're talking about is the power of judicial review and the power to say what the law is. And on that, the Supreme Court has the last word for sure. But in terms of you exercising your own authority,
the last word.
Okay, you disagree with Marbury versus Madison, right?
No, I think you said he doesn't. You don't disagree. Right? Wait, Will, you said you don't disagree.
Yeah, I don't disagree with judicial review existing. What I
mean is, sorry. Do you agree or disagree that the Supreme Court says what the law is?
I agree with that.
Okay.
So what I mean is, let's look at the border bill, right? So for how many months did the Democrats say we need to get this border bill passed through? It's bipartisan. Everybody supports it. Blah blah blah. And you know, it's the Democrats or it's the Republicans. It's Trump that's holding up. It's Trump's fault that it died. And then Biden signs an executive order that does some things, but not everything. It's not great. But what it does is it leaves in the perception that the president isn't making any effort. It's leaving in the perception that, like, you know, the president's just throwing their hands up and saying, I can't do anything, leave it up to the legislature. And then when the president does go around to doing some kind of executive order, it looks like he was just kind of lying. And what I think Biden should have done is he should have, you know, signed an executive order that maybe it was way out of bounds of what the president could do, but then it's up to the Supreme Court to stop it. And then every day he signs, you know, a slightly different executive order that the Supreme Court can shoot down, and keep doing that in the meantime while legislation goes through Congress, just to show, like, hey, I'm making an effort here, even though, you know, it's the Supreme Court who are the bad guys who are stopping.
Just to clarify, are you saying he should have done the same executive order sooner, or he should have done a different, more tough executive order and then different iterations of it to evade judicial review?
Both. So like
Okay.
he could have started with a more broad one that does more and have it get shot down, and then, you know, at some point end up with the one he got. But the idea that you can just like not do anything and look to the legislature to do stuff when everybody knows that nothing gets through Congress
Making a
seems
lot of
weak.
sense.
But that's not true.
ineffective.
That's not true though. Things do get through Congress, so I don't know what that means.
That's not the perception, though. People
This
don't.
is
But
the world
nothing
we
border
still want.
related, sadly. That's the case.
The problem that Biden, he just waited too long. He waited way too long to take action on the border. In retrospect, that's pretty obvious. So
Yeah.
I think what he's doing is illegal, and I disagree with what you're saying, which is like you should be doing these kind of manipulation tactics to evade judicial review by just like literally iterating it such a way to like get out from ever being reviewed by a court. That seems like exactly what
I
Trump
would
tried to do.
love it.
I mean, you guys don't
Love it.
seem to like the institution of the independent judiciary. I actually like that we have courts that, or even if they're biased courts, having a check is better than having no check.
Let me explain myself.
Well, but you don't like a
Hold
check
on.
against the court. That's the problem. I would be so much
we
more
go.
sympathetic to your position if
okay,
you were
all right.
also.
I'm putting a
if-
stop
yeah.
to this right now. We are not getting into a debate about the independent.
That's what,
I
that's what
just-
Pisco and I do.
I-
When
Go to the next
Pisco and I
caller.
go to our
Let's go to the
Hornets
next
game,
caller. No,
when
let's
Pisco and
to
I
the
go to our
no,
Hornets game,
no.
we're just going to be bitching about this
Will, it was
nonstop.
great talking to you.
No,
Look, I just have
no.
to explain myself because Pisco, he
Thanks,
said, you know,
Will.
levied an accusation. Like to explain my position, I just think it would be funny to troll the current court. Okay, so if I was president, I'd write 10,000 executive orders and I'd be like, "Good luck reviewing all these, Mr. Chief Justice Roberts." Okay, gonna have some of these slide on through because you just can't review all of them. And I would do funny official act things to make fun of their little ruling. I'd be like, "Look, there's no, I can order an FBI agent to follow you around all the time. He's just following
I'm
you around
declaring
and taking
today
notes."
national you have no law enforcement agency at your behest and I do
Yeah.
day.
You
Fuck
would
you.
rescind
this-
the Supreme
this-
Court justices like
This executive
security detail.
order. This executive order says that the weekend doesn't apply to the Supreme Court judge. They no longer get weekends. That's not a thing anymore. Okay, pensions for the Supreme Court, we're not processing them anymore. Okay,
It's
like
cringe.
tons of trolly stuff like that. Anyway,
All right, we
But
got Xavier. Xavier, what's up, man?
Hey.
Do you disagree?
disagreement.
Okay, I disagree a bit. As a Gen Zer, I just kind of want to come in here.
Gen
As you
Z,
old heads,
rise up.
I'm rising up. All right, so this is kind of towards.
But are you risen up?
He's a Gen Z man. They went 49 to 48 in favor of Trump. I don't know if we could
Yeah,
trust.
guys
so
are
this
such
is kind of
boomers.
what I want to start with. Is as a Gen Zer, I kind of want to throw out like there's kind of a rise of anti-establishment, like very, very high in my age bracket, and I'm just trying to think of like ways of combating that. Like trying to talk to people my age is almost impossible, you know, like anything to do with that type of thing. And hearing Hutch a bit talk about like trans issues, that's like a no-go. And I'm wondering, like, I think Democrats need to like just completely distance themselves from like anything woke, you know, like I get the whole idea, like, yeah, they're not running on that, but I mean, it just feels like that. I don't know if like,
Hutch,
Well,
you were
y'all
name
can-
drop, man. You gotta
Sorry,
respond.
I
Hutch,
would
love
just
you.
say that being kind of vaguely anti-establishment is not necessarily unique for young generations. That's kind of always the case with young generations. It just tends to be skewing right now because that's
Occupy
where the
Wall
culture
Street.
is. Yeah, Occupy. I mean, the anti-war movement in the late 60s and early 70s was propelled by, you know, what would have been Gen Z people back then, right?
Yeah.
So as far as like the anti-woke stuff, I just think that like I don't know what the answer is, but I'm with Econo Boy where I view it as like I view this as a civil rights issue. I mean, we can get into the nuance about trans people in sports. I think like you can have conversations when it comes to that and discuss possible solutions. It's really tricky, but whatever. I can understand nuance when it comes to that. But so much of the anti-trans wave that's been happening in the last 5 years, it goes so much deeper than trans people in sports. I mean, there's a firm belief with a substantial percentage of people that live in this country that trans people are just psychotic. We shouldn't indulge their delusions. Doesn't matter that gender affirming care yields wildly positive results in terms of reducing self-harm and suicidality and things like that. I just don't think the Democrats should walk away from that. I think we should hold the line to a certain extent when it comes to these issues. Otherwise, just feels like we lose our moral compass altogether.
I understand that. It's almost like where do you draw the line of like, hey, we're losing because of this issue? And I'm pro-trans, by the way. I'm not trying to come off as that. It's just like talking to people my age. I'm in the South. They're very Christian. That's just a non-starter.
What do they say to you when you bring it up?
They're just instantly like, they're not real. Like, they have mental illness, and I would never support Kamala for having like trans prisoners, right? It's just a non-starter. And it's almost like, do you just like completely distance yourself, or do you try to inform? But like, how do you inform someone like that?
The trans prisoner thing, real quick, and then you go. The trans prisoner thing is bullshit. Those laws were on the books when Donald Trump was president as well. So just so you know, that wasn't a Kamala policy. That's just a law that's written a certain way, and it was on the books when Trump was president. So.
Yeah, I remember. This has been a kind of a wedge issue for quite a while. I actually remember a decade ago in the great city of Houston, we had a little thing called the Houston Equal Rights Ordinance. And somehow conservatives in the city of Houston spun this to mean like, if you vote for HERO, the Houston Equal Rights Ordinance, you're voting for men going in women's bathrooms. And this actually led to the city of Houston, a fairly left-leaning city, to vote against an equal rights ordinance because of basically conservative propaganda. So, going off of what we said, the way that I would handle that is understand, number one, you're never convincing them out of their trans opinions. They're going to hate trans people for a really long time until they go through the slow, methodical process of either becoming a better person or dying as a bigot. So those are sort of the two paths that they're on, and you have very little ability to change that. What I would encourage elected Democrats to do, and what I would do as well when talking to like your everyday conservatives who really hate trans people, is look, this is not part of Democratic platforms. It's not something that they're running on majorly, but let's look at every other issue, right? Like, presumably there are issues that are more important than the handful of trans women who are playing women's, sports in high school or whatever it is, right? Like, presumably there's more important issues. Like, the healthcare plan of the Democrats is better. The minimum wage plan is better. They support unions more. Supporting families and upbringings is much better. I find conservatives, there's not a zero. It's not like the percentage of Republicans that are pro-choice in terms of their inclinations is zero. It's actually quite a lot of Republicans who are pro-choice. It's like, hey, they're better on that issue as well. At the end of the day, look, if you're an evangelical Christian who thinks abortion is murder and you hate gay people, well, you're never going to vote for Democrats anyway. So it kind of depends on who you're talking to. But generally speaking, I would just reframe the issue and say, look, that's fair enough, but the Democrats are basically better on literally conceivably every other issue, typically based on their own frameworks. Because a lot of times when you ask them, like, hey, do you like the idea of a child tax allowance? And do you like a universal health care? Like, usually the answer to these questions on regular conservatives is yes. And it's like, well, if that's the case, then you should probably support
right. And
Democrats.
there's nothing about, pro-trans legislation that will jeopardize these other much more relevant, much more popular policy prescriptions that you won't get from the Republican Party. And moreover, it's just ridiculous to try to, alienate, a very small percentage of the population, which is already disproportionately high in terms of suicidality and other abuse they suffer. So that's the way I approach it with my conservative family members and friends. And they're not so outright cruel as to say, no, fuck them. Let's double down on this trans shit. They just still end up usually going with Republicans because they believe Republicans will be better for their pocket.
Yeah, look at the number of kids, number of trans, number of children on HRT, and the number of trans children competing in sports. And compare that to the number of children who are in poverty because the Republicans allowed the child tax credit to expire. It's like an order of magnitude more. Like, it's just, obviously we're in coalition politics. I vote for Democrats because I think generally they're better than the Republicans, but I don't agree with them on every issue. And similarly, it just seems like, look, if you can just realize that even if you think that the trans issues are a really important issue for that group of people, understand that there's definitely bigger issues out there if you're a Republican. And in theory, we would care more about the millions of children who don't live in poverty anymore than the literal handful of trans, students competing in their category. So
Xavier, I've got to let you go, buddy, because we've got like 4 other people here. Okay. Hutch, is there anything you want to say before we let Xavier go?
I was just going to say, I think the arts fill an important role for this kind of a situation too. I think one of the reasons why people in big cities tend to be more open-minded is because they're exposed to a lot of different people. A lot of people that live in rural, kind of secluded communities in this country, many of them have never seen a trans person. They've never met a trans person. So they have these stigmas and negative stereotypes in their minds. And so, like, for example, there was a movie called Will and Marley, and it's on Netflix, and it's Will Ferrell taking a road trip with a longtime friend of his that came out as a trans woman when she was like 65 years old. And it really humanizes her, and it tells the story in a very heartwarming way. And I think, I would just like to see the arts like do more to tell these human stories in a way that can sort of break through people's ingrained stereotypes.
Xavier, appreciate it, man. Thank you. All right. So now we got to go to, we're going to bring two at a time on. Sorry. Margument's been waiting forever, and we're also going to bring on T-Dog. But Margument, first word to you, buddy. What's up? What do you disagree
with? Can you hear me?
On? We can.
Wow, great. What's up, guys? All right, let me think. Okay, so Hutch, congratulations. You've been the most right tonight. East Coast was almost the most right, but then he came in and defended some dumb shit immediately.
Oh shit!
No.
You're gonna have to specify, sir.
It's a Supreme Court takes, isn't it, man?
Yeah, it always is.
Let's not relitigate that.
Yeah, exactly. No. Okay. So no, Hutch was. I think it was Hutch that was saying that conservatives don't want to live in America.
They don't want American democracy anymore.
Right. Liberal democracy. They want all the perks of living in America, but somehow want to be able to transform the country into some other iteration of it that could have never existed because of liberal democracy, right?
Yes.
Yeah, no, I was just agreeing with you. I was just saying you were very correct about that. But you also said that Donald Trump was held accountable for COVID mismanagement.
Yeah, in the 2020 election, that was the number one reason voters reported that they.
Oh, my bad. Yeah, exactly. I very, very, very strongly disagree with that statement. I think to your knowledge, what is the fallout of that mismanagement? Like, what is the cost of the mismanagement? Not the pandemic in general, just
the political cost. You mean to Trump? Just to
no. Like the cost for America.
Well, according to Burks,
mm-hmm.
It was according to Burks, it was I think 150 to 200,000 people died needlessly. That's what his own.
Yeah, she said everybody in her estimation after the first 100,000 deaths were almost inevitable, but everything after that could have been substantially mitigated had the Trump administration taken it more seriously,
including economic damage. And just on that topic, there is absolutely no force in the world besides his own idiocy that would make him politicize it on day one and then downplay it. There's just no reason to do it.
Well, I think he viewed economic vulnerability as a liability for his campaign. I think it was literally that simple. And he's running his own businesses, so I think he had a personal interest in making sure that like the country opened back up. But I think he probably thought that if he, went along with mitigation, lockdowns, masking, working from home, anything that could have hurt the economy, I think he probably equated that with poor
defeat.
Election prospects. But I do think that like
if he would have handled
it competently, I think he would have won re-election pretty easily.
Yeah, but if he had handled it more competently, then as many Americans wouldn't have died, right? There wouldn't have been as much economic damage, right?
Yeah,
and I don't even mean just like handling it particularly like hyper competently, just not politicizing it. If you come out and you're like, yeah, this shit's not real, and also China did it, on our side, we're just gonna be like, fam, what the fuck are you like? No.
Well, he's just an eminent narcissist, so he sees the world through his own prism always, and so it's always about how it affects him. So he wasn't thinking about the country when it came to COVID. He wasn't thinking about the hospitals that were being overwhelmed or the body count or anything like that. He was just thinking about like, how's this going to impact the election? I think that's pretty simple.
I think I'm with you on that. I just think that if people understood the cost of him being him, and attributed it to him, I don't think it would have. First of all, I don't think he could have ever been elected again, and I think he probably would have been, if not impeached, or like there would have been some other consequence. And I think people were probably dissatisfied with the state of the country. It's like, oh, this is inconvenient for me right now. But I don't think people were like, yeah, he got a bunch of people killed that did not need to die. A bunch of people are disabled with long COVID, da 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 da. Like this man, like I don't think that's what it was. I think it was more so just like, this is inconvenient for me right now.
So to sum up, my argument, because I think you're making excellent points. It's not that you're saying that Trump didn't suffer, that he did. You're acknowledging he suffered to some degree.
He got like 25% of what he deserved,
but not a fraction of what it truly merited.
Yeah,
Hutch, do you disagree with that?
No.
Okay. So, Margument, great points. You and Hutch are in alignment there. Was there any specific issue you had with Pisco?
I'm not trying to the courts.
Yeah, I'm not saying. Listen, wait a minute. I'm not saying anything about the courts. I'm just saying, like, listen. You feel free.
You guys got people waiting.
Okay, fair. Yeah, he's like, it's gonna take too long to hash out his disagreements with Pisco. All right, man. I appreciate it. Anything else before we let you go?
Guys. Nah, you guys, you're doing good. Keep it up.
Appreciate you, man. Thank you. All right, we've got Tito.
Hello. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Sure
All right,
can.
great, cool. This is the first time I'm ever using this platform, so I just found it to be. Frankly, I don't even know who really anyone here is other than Hutch. I was just looking him up after like I was just thinking of like OG COD MW2 gameplay. I was like, he's my favorite commentator. I gotta go back to him, and I was like, he's live streaming politics. This is cool. So like, I don't know. I come from the perspective of perhaps like the average American, perhaps maybe slightly more motivated to learn about this stuff in different perspectives. And frankly, I've only been here for like the past 15 minutes. So maybe if there's a more specific claim, that'd be a bit more interesting. But one thing I just heard was basically everyone who like disagrees with like trans ideology potentially is just a straight up bigot. I don't know who has all the flags in the background, but that seemed like a claim that was made. Yes. Yeah. So I just didn't know what you meant by that, because that just seemed kind of like a bit of an extreme statement.
Yeah, I mean, really what I was describing was a kind of voter who really just is a bigot, right? Like there are some people that just hate trans people. And if you find yourself talking to someone like that, then it'd be very difficult to kind of convince them otherwise. But if you're talking to someone who just has like, this sort of like more soft view, like, I don't know, like just trans women competing in women's sports, that just seems kind of weird to me. I think if you're talking to a person like that, then obviously it's probably a lot easier to convince them on the weighing argument. Like, okay, well, just like, it seems like it's just a much bigger deal to vote for the Democratic platform because it just helps so many more people. Although it doesn't address what they might think of as a problem with the trans people in sports or whatever.
If we just look at the definition of bigot, it's a person who is obstinately or intolerantly devoted to his or her own opinions and prejudices, especially one who regards or treats the members of a group such as racial or ethnic group. I think we would all agree that trans identity would qualify as well, with hatred and intolerance. And we're seeing that to a level that we haven't seen in this country since like the anti-queer hysteria of the 80s that was blowback against the sexual revolution in the 70s. It's like, it's just so much worse now than it was for me in the 90s. And it was explicitly homophobic in the culture in the 90s. So
yeah, I think it's like on both sides, just that sort of animosity towards everyone.
Well, when what would you say would be the equivalent of like, so you have anti-trans, virulently anti-trans stuff on the right. What would you see as an equivalent on the left?
Man, there's just, that's a really great question to try and find something like direct about that. I think like we're just calling for, or here's a question. What's the name of the guy with the lots of the flags in the back? Sorry.
Econoboy.
My online moniker.
Right. So how much of like
your fucking
right
name stuff?
How much of the right, so-called right, would you say holds that view that you were just describing where they're more bigoted as such? Like, do you think that's a small portion or like a larger?
I'm really not sure, honestly. I would say maybe in terms of the people who have very, very hateful opinions towards trans people, I'd just be throwing up a number. I would say of the people who voted for Trump, maybe a quarter of them. So, maybe that would be like 10 or 15 million people.
But I think that I would go way higher than it's a defining feature of conservative conservative project right now.
It's just going to be a matter of like how you view like how harsh the opinion is. Because I could imagine someone who's like,
because
they're not like
strong word, and I'm just trying to like really trying to put that in perspective.
Well, look, I mean, we can't play pretend and just say like, oh, there's not a serious problem with racism and bigotry on the part of the Republicans, right? I mean, that just like obviously when you have a bunch of people who are saying mass deportation now signs, like I think that a lot of these people are just racist and probably just don't really care for brown people entering their country. Now, obviously, you could say, well, there's a lot of them who just genuinely think that immigration flows are a big issue. I wouldn't disagree with that. But this country has a lot of racists in it. And the racists who vote, well, they tend to vote for the Republicans, right? And I think that similarly, there's a lot of transphobes in this country. And of the transphobes
is there
that
data
vote.
on that?
Data on what?
Like you're saying most of the racists, that like there are a lot of racist people in the country, most of them vote right. Like I can get that general sentiment and how that's like been throughout history. And if you're thinking about a stereotypical racist, how they're more racist towards black people, right? There are different claims now about like whatever, if you want to use terminology, reverse racism, whatever, if it's just a true or false value, positive or negative value on whether someone is racist or not. Like what percentage of the population is on either side? Like, how do you know these things? Because I think like sort of like very wide claims to say, 60% of people over 50, some people are saying it has to be at least 50% of people on the right are hateful and racist, right? This is the type of language that I think is sort of pushing us further apart.
Well, you can look at polling information on like people who have extreme views on race. Like I think that I think white supremacists, like if you're a self-described white supremacist, they'll poll you and disaggregate like, oh, who are the white supremacists voting for in one election or another. And in the polls, these people tend to participate in Republican primaries and they tend to vote for the more extreme candidates. And look, I think that you can recognize that there's a real problem with racism in this country and bigotry in this country, and that those people tend to vote disproportionately for Republicans. Obviously, without making the claim that the overwhelming majority of Republicans hold these extremely racist views. I think that, I don't know if you watched the whole show today, but one thing that I spoke about earlier was that I think that ignorance is just a really big problem. Like, I think that one of the reasons why people would even like say to themselves like, oh, I don't know about trans women playing in women's sports. If that's just a very ignorant thing to say, right? And I think that that's
from a
big
competitive perspective or like an ethical perspective.
Both really. I mean, we don't have to get into it, but I just think that a lot of the problems that you're seeing with why Republicans believe the things that they do, you could say the same thing on some of the bad opinions that Democrats have. A lot of it is just incomplete information. People just aren't totally well informed. So
when we look at specifically anti-queerness, what we observed in this country, it was on a steady upward trend through the 90s or whatever, but then it really went up after the 2014 Supreme Court opinion that allowed for gay marriage in this country. Republican voters, in terms of like Gallup polls and Pew Research polls and whatnot, they actually got to a majority approval for gay marriage in this country. And that has gone on the downswing. So basically every group has gone on the downswing as a result of this anti-queer hysteria. But when you ask Democrats, it's something like 88% think that gay marriage should be legal. Independents is like 75%. When it comes to Republicans, they're back down below 50% at this point.
Today.
So today. Most Republican voters today oppose gay marriage. And so we're not just making this stuff up. I don't know what else to call that besides.
And just to be clear, like opposing gay marriage is just a bigoted belief to have, right? There are some opinions where it's like, no, you're just homophobic.
I mean, I would say that in their defense, right? If I'm going to try to say that, which I do not agree with that statement. I think gay marriage should be completely legalized, right? With respect to their religion, if they believe that marriage should be a more like, a religious thing rather than like a legal.
There's no good argument for imposing a strict religious interpretation of marriage. There's no good argument.
Yeah, if it already exists as a legal concept, I would agree. That like figure really does surprise me.
There's nothing to preclude someone from saying like, I don't believe, like my church, my faith says that you can't be gay married or whatever. But if somebody's not a part of my church and they get married, then that's none of my business. They don't take that view. They take the view that their religious beliefs should dictate policy and that everybody else around them should operate under those rules.
So T-Dog, we got to let you go. We got Jaden and Preston in the queue, and we're gonna have to wrap up soon. But listen, appreciate you hopping on and sparring with Hutch, whom you followed since the Call of Duty days.
Yeah, thanks for swinging by the channel. I'm sure that was weird for you.
Can I like put down one really odd opinion, essentially, that I've not heard people talk about in terms of pro-life, pro-choice?
Sure.
Just for a second.
Final note. Yeah, go ahead.
First, I'm an atheist, right? I think scientifically, life starts at the moment of conception. However, science does not define morality. And I think that's a conversation that we have yet to really discuss on what is a life and how do you place a moral value on that. And I just don't think a lot of people have been discussing about that. So that's just some food for thought.
It's a good point. I think the question becomes when does human life that matters, when does it start to matter?
Right.
Well, like life becomes human life, and like where, like, is it a scale of value, right? Like that's
technically an unfertilized egg is life. You know what I mean? But like, yeah, at what point does it become sentient life or life worth protecting? I guess.
So T-Dog, appreciate it, man. We got to let you go. Thank you so much. Well, again, we do this every week, and we're going to start doing this on Mondays. So this will probably become a recurring thing where if you have disagreements,
you can just pop in.
We'll let you know. Appreciate you. Thank you.
Thanks,
all right.
bud.
So now let's do Jaden because he's been waiting for forever, and we'll also bring Preston on as well, and then we'll end with Nick, who is third in line. But Jaden, go ahead, buddy. You've been waiting for forever. Thank you for your patience.
All right, so I don't disagree with you guys. I'm definitely on your side. I'm a more liberal person. I'm even probably a little bit more left. But I work in the blue-collar field. I'm a welder. And I am surrounded by conservatives day in, day out. Their mindsets, they themselves, in their point of view, don't believe themselves to be bigots because they do not understand what being a bigot is. They look at the world and they don't understand looking at it from someone else's point of view because they have never had to have that chance or wanted to take that chance to do that.
They probably convince themselves that trans people pose a threat to kids. That's a very common belief in right-wing circles.
And especially it's even harder where I live because I live in Utah. So it's even more rough when it comes to the conservative circle of things, especially when the LDS church is involved and everybody's, as I would say, is brainwashed into these ideas.
Not to interrupt real quick, but this is so interesting you say that because something that's referenced quite a bit here by Econoboy and Hutch is how Governor Cox vetoed a bill in Utah which would discriminate against trans student athletes on the grounds he's like, listen, this is going to target like 2 or 3 people in the fucking state. This is cruel and unnecessary.
Yeah. So with anything when it comes to the government in Utah, it is completely controlled by the LDS church. And if people tell you anything otherwise, they are completely disillusioned. Every single person on every council inside this state is, other than like 98% of the time, is going to be a Republican that is from the LDS church. So there isn't any real, with Governor Cox going and doing that, he knew, I guarantee it, to make him look good and possibly like get some people's sympathy or empathy to get him votes. He did that as a political move because he knows there's people that are left in Salt Lake County that is the Democratic or more Democratic and blue area in the state are going to look at that and be like, oh, that's actually super nice. But in the long run, it's not going to matter because the way the
I got to disagree.
Works.
I think you should read his letter. It read to me as very sincere. Like he said at one point, I don't understand their experience, but I want these kids to live. And he directly referenced the high suicide rates for trans youth. And to me, it was a really touching letter. And it didn't read to me as like cynical politics, but maybe you're right.
And I completely understand that. And I agree. I have read the letter and it is a very beautifully written letter. But something that I guess isn't talked about in politics in Utah very much is that the LDS church in general is very good at having that fake sympathy. And it's something that is constant within the church. And you can see it just when it comes to anything inside Utah. Like every Mormon is pro-life, but then a warming shelter for the homeless is talked about getting put in. And then Mormons go and they go to the city council and they're yelling about how it's unsafe for their children for this homeless shelter to be put in. And like it's that kind of situation when it comes to gay marriage or basically anybody in the LGBTQ plus communities. They will say it really nicely in face, but when it comes to the brass tacks of actually going and having these point of views and actually listening to these people that are a minority, they really won't go out of their way to really do anything for them.
I agree and disagree with this. Like, Mormon Republicans are kind of built different. Like, for instance, Utah was one of the only, I think to this day, it's the only Republican state to have renewable energy standards, because Mormons have this like very apocalyptic view of the world, I guess you could say. Like, Mormons are super duper into like doomsday prepping, basically.
Yes.
And it's kind of a bizarre thing, but anyway, like that actually led them to have a more progressive policy on environmental policy. I believe they were one of the only Republican states to have a housing first approach for homeless people, which is kind of this like Mormon, like ultimately empathetic point of view. And so I agree that like a lot of Mormons are just, like they might hide behind their label and, oh, I'm just the nice Mormon down the street and I'm not a crazy bigot like these regular Republicans. But, they do seem to, a lot of Mormon Republicans do seem to genuinely be built different. I mean, after all, in 2016, I think that McMullen got like 25% of the vote in Utah. Like, there were a really large percentage of Mormons who said, I am a conservative, but I'm not voting for Trump. I mean, they elected Mitt Romney, for instance, right? I mean, and Mitt Romney is one of the more anti like Trump Republicans, right? So,
So, Jaden, I'm so sorry to do this, man, but we're gonna have to wrap up soon because we typically end this after an hour and a half, and excuse me, we're already over time.
Can I say one last thing real quick, Josiah?
Super quick, please.
Yeah. So when it comes to messaging to these Republicans, they're not going to listen to anybody that's going to like try and explain something as if they don't know. The way you need to get it across to them is basically reverse psychology and or basically a anti-cult look at how to break down their beliefs, because they have been given these ever since they've been ever since birth, and they have been constantly in it, and they have never been told anything different. So if you're going to go after to try and like move any of them, which I don't think is going to be very beneficial in the long run, it has to be more from that mindset rather than trying to convince them on facts, because they will specifically only believe their own view.
All right, man. Hey, appreciate you. Now we're gonna go to Preston, then Nick, and then we're gonna wrap up. So Preston, do you disagree with us about something, buddy?
Kind of. Kind of piggybacking off of what he was just talking about. I think the entire messaging atmosphere needs to shift to a more aggressive tone, I think. I think he's entirely right that most conservatives are probably not going to listen to facts or are going to listen to any type of logical thought process, but attacking them and challenging their beliefs, I think, might be a better way at going and kind of coaxing out how they think. I don't really know how they think. It's very different than the way that I go about thinking about things. But I think ultimately challenging beliefs and going to the root core and attacking essentially bad faith questions and acting it would be more effective messaging from liberals and leftists. Like, even when we're talking about like the trans stuff, if someone brings up what is a woman, obviously they're asking a question in bad faith. Ask them for their definition and then start attacking and ripping apart their definition when it's insufficient to describe everything that or everyone that we would consider a woman. I just think that we need to be more aggressive. I think that's where we're the pivot. I feel the pivot happening.
They've changed though. They've changed. Imane Khalif woke them up to the illusion of the gender binary.
That's true.
Now they believe that men can get pregnant, right? So,
yes,
men can get pregnant.
I think it's the drum beat. So they get on a drum beat within central themes and just beat that drum. It's the dog whistle, but in a more militant fashion. And I think that we need to have a similar kind of militant beat and lingo. Otherwise, I don't know how you compete against a force that is essentially trying to wipe out liberalism.
I mean, this goes to a lot of it seems like one of the things that people have taken from this previous election is that the liberals and like left-leaning people need to just generally do a better job of building their own media ecosystem. Sort of a fighting fire with fire approach, unfortunately, but it's sort of that's all you can really do in such an environment, right? It's like, oh, we just need to kind of compete for the alternative space and go from there. But I think we generally agree that.
I was just going to say, I'm not really thinking too much about specific messaging strategy right now. I'm kind of waiting for the Trump administration to kick off. Like, I feel like Well, because I feel like because
we're in a lame duck situation where literally we can blame so many things on him, from his tax cuts in terms of people feeling
it's going to fall on deaf ears because Americans are going to give him a honeymoon period no matter what. And so it's so much of this right now is like so much of what the strategy to counter Trump and MAGA moving forward is going to depend on what he does. And so it just requires us to be dynamic and the way that we adjust.
Why not set the narrative and go after him?
But Nick, what you say right now,
we'll be on the offense. We'll be. I guarantee you, we will be on
over a decade, and that was.
No, but Nick, what you say right now is not gonna. 4 years from now, what is said today is not gonna really play a very big role in the outcome of the election, right? So, I mean, to Hutch's point, you have to keep in mind, like, Trump is a very incompetent and scandalous person by nature, right? Like, he's going to do crazy shit. He's going to do corrupt things that get him into scandals. I mean, there's probably like, if you had to, I wonder what the odds would be. I don't know what the odds, there's probably like odds on Polymarket. Like the odds that Trump gets impeached again, I don't know. Like I'd give it like a 75% chance that he's going to do some shit that gets him impeached a third time. Wouldn't be surprised. The point is like, I don't know. Yeah, I think that Hutch's general sense of calm is probably the right move here because you don't want to put your foot in your mouth. But that's just all speculation. I mean, we don't set Democratic messaging. Democrats seem like they've right now taken a pretty calm approach.
Peace Code, is there anything you want to say to that?
No, just on the, I wanted something about the trans situation. I go back to Batman all the time, but there's a scene in the first Batman Begins where he says, "You always fear what you don't understand." And I think that in addition to some of the, there's some genuinely bad apples, of course, in the MAGA group. I think there's a lot of lack of understanding, lack of personal contact, and especially in this age when what you're getting and what you're seeing are things that give you misapprehensions and not understanding. It's not really conducive to coming up with good ideas or to think of trans people as people. And so I just want to put it out there that it's a tough ask. I don't think that all of these people are just useless bigots that are deserving of our contempt. Some of them are for sure, but we should be promoting more understanding. And sorry, I know that doesn't exactly relate, but there were a couple issues of the trans stuff that came up that I wanted to speak up.
I would feed off of that though, but they're not looking for understanding; they're looking for forceful action. I think that is a central part of how a lot of conservatives are thinking and feeling right now. They're not looking to just talk things out; they want drastic action, regardless of where it comes from or in what form. So I think being more aggressive does help with that, especially when it comes to minority communities. Not in a in-your-face, like pompous way, but in a, hey, these are people, leave them alone. I think that resonates with people more.
Preston, I'm giving you the last word on this, man. I appreciate it. I'm so sorry to cut this short, but
No
we got to
worries,
get to Nick.
you guys are over time.
Yeah, thank you, buddy. All right, Nick, it's all you, buddy.
Hi, I want to disagree with Hutch on his take that The Batman is the best Batman movie. It is obviously The Dark Knight.
The Dark Knight was hard. The Dark Knight was hard carried by Heath Ledger, who did give a legendary performance, but the action scenes in that movie are kind of trash when you look at the way that they were shot and framed. They're totally inconsistent. You can find videos.
They're stylistic. They're stylistic.
They're stylistic, bro. That's true.
The Batman might be in the top 5 Batman movies. The Dark Knight is in the top 5 movies.
Whoa.
The Batman might be in the top 5 Batman movies.
Listen, but here's what I really wanted to jump in here and say, guys. I'm listening to the last 2 commenters, and I think there's going to be a lot of talk right now about what we as Democrats can't do, the way that we're sort of powerless to watch as democracy falls in front of our eyes, and the need to put on a happy face. And I don't necessarily want to argue this with you, but if I can, I'd love to just nudge you all to continue in the direction of positivity. I think that was such a smart choice at the start of the Harris campaign to go to the DNC and talk about the positivity and how positive a character Tim Walz is. I think there is still a practical Democrat that exists across this country who probably reads more news than the average person and probably is very depressed right now, like I am, but we're still looking for that sliver of hope. So all I really want to say is I appreciate you guys for even still being out here. You're great.
There's no nobility in depression, quite frankly. So like, if there's one thing that I want to say right now is like, if you find yourself succumbing to hopelessness or actually like feeling actual clinical style depression, there's nothing wrong with backing off politics for a couple weeks and just focusing on your immediate life and being active and being healthy and hanging out with friends and stuff like that. So
to your other point though, Nick, we're here to bring the hope, and I hope that you'll know that we are a group of knee benders. We're not going to give up. We're not going to say that like all of a sudden Elon's our new best friend. We tell it how it is, and we'll make allies where we can, because I think that Trump will fuck up, and that will give us plenty of opportunity to capitalize on that and hit him where it hurts next time. So there's plenty of stuff to do. Yeah.
Trump can't not fuck up. It's in his DNA. He's just going to, he's going to be him. And I feel like he's going to clarify pretty much right away what our response is going to be. So
yeah,
it's just, we just got to wait like a month and a week. That's it.
Nick, last word to you, buddy.
All I'll say is I still believe you could be kind and strong, and we got to stand up to these bullies. That's really all I see MAGA as anymore. They're just bullies. They just want to hurt people. Drives me crazy, but we'll be out here carrying the torch. So thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate you, Nick.
Good talking to you.
That was very wholesome of him. I unfortunately don't agree. I think we have to bully the bullies, and
we have a wholesome audience.
So happy.
Josiah.
We do have a wholesome audience. They clearly come, as you can tell from Hutch's community. They're not as ruthless as you are, Kana boy.
They can be.
So just some last minute things here before we dip. I just want to say, Pisco, we're going to have to talk about this at some point, but apparently Justice Merchan said that Trump is not entitled to presidential immunity protections
just now?
in his hush money case.
I'm going to stream about this if there's an opinion.
Yeah, so people, after we're done with this, Pisco is going to stream on his own channel. You are welcome to check that out.
Just as a self plug real quick. I changed my streaming schedule. I'm going to start earlier now. So I'm going to start like somewhere between like 9 and 9:30 Pacific, and I'm going to go until about 1:30.
Hell yeah.
Nice.
So, if you guys are looking for like an early morning political fix, I'm going to be live on Twitch and YouTube, youtube.com/Hutch, twitch.tv/Hutch every morning, or rather Monday through Friday.
No, he said every morning. That's a commitment to the weekends. Second thing, real quick. AOC has apparently lost a preliminary vote to become House Oversight ranking member. Just a preliminary vote of like the House leadership, like the Democratic caucus leadership. She says that she is confident once it gets to a full vote of the caucus, she thinks she'll beat Jerry Connolly. Do we all agree that Jerry Connolly should just bow the fuck out?
100%.
Yes.
AOC,
he's great, but he's to choose, and he needs to be AOC. Do we all agree with that?
100%.
Hutch,
I don't know anything about him, but
make her the chair of every committee somehow.
I wouldn't bet against Nancy. I'm just saying.
Well, I don't know. Listen, that's where things got serious, is when Pelosi started to put her weight behind Connolly. And honestly, I mean, obviously we're not privy to the full details, but I think that was a colossal mistake, and it sure fucking reads like that long reported grudge Pelosi has against AOC manifesting itself. And that really pisses me off. I think Nancy Pelosi was a brilliant speaker, but this is bullshit. AOC has the chops. She's demonstrated the learning curve. She has been vice ranking chair in the oversight committee, this very committee. So she's outranked Connolly, serving under Jamie Raskin. She has the profile. She has to me, it's like, what you have to have a very good fucking reason after the previous election to not go with more star power and youth. Do we all agree? Like
100%.
Yeah.
It's very weird. I thought the latest reporting on AOC and Nancy was that they had sort of rebuilt their relationship, but then I saw this and I was like, what happened? Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's horseshit. And then the third thing, Jared Moskowitz.
I really gotta go, boys. I'm sorry.
Right,
I love
Jared
you guys,
Moskowitz is apparently eyed. See you, buddy. We're about to dip out. Jared Moskowitz apparently is being eyed to be FEMA director under Trump. So that would potentially take him out of his congressional seat, which would be filled by a special election. Very good chance a Republican replaces him. So I'm hoping he declines that offer if one is made. That's it. We're done. We'll be back on Monday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. And I saw that Pine Creek was in the chat. Again, the guy we sparred with. Again, you're welcome to come back next time.
Yeah, come back.
Child poverty was lowest under President Biden when the child tax credit was in place before 50 Republicans let it expire. Donald Trump is inferior to Joe Biden per usual. We will always win that argument. You will always lose. That's
Wait,
fun. We'll leave
Josiah.
it there. Thanks, everybody.